Welcome back to RetroWheelsVault with Horsepower Never Dies. I'm RetroVault 4, your tour guide through the Chrome Dreams and V8 Symphonies. Today we're rolling back to 1957 when the Ford Thunderbird wasn't just a car. It was America's four-wheeled love letter to style and speed. Because modern cars forgot what muscle means. Here's a wild size of 57 Thunderbird history that reads like a spy novel for gearheads. NASCAR relaxed its engine rules that year, opening the door for enhanced induction systems, including superchargers and fuel injection, and Ford pounced. Robert S. McNamara sent a memo to the Ford Executive Committee in 1965 championing an internal engine program to keep the Thunderbird's reputation untarnished. He pushed for a new McCulloch supercharger on the 312 cubic inch 4-valve carburetor engine, claiming it could outperform any fuel injection system Chevrolet was cooking up. Ford planned a tiny production run, just enough to satisfy NASCAR homologation rules, 65 custom two-door sedans, 20 convertibles, and a mere 15 Thunderbirds. These 15 T-Birds were hand-built at Dearborn on January 25, 1957, each fitted with a single-carb 312 V8 McCulloch VR57 Phase 1 supercharger, heavy-duty 3-speed manual, seatbelts, and a fiberglass hardtop. They were basically the James Bond version of the Thunderbird, exclusive, engineered for speed, and guaranteed to make everyone else on the track look like they bought a tricycle to a drag race. This tiny supercharged batch kick-started the Ford Motor Company's supercharger program, proving Ford didn't just build cars, they built legends. It was speed, style, and engineering wizardry rolled into one roaring chrome-coated package. The 57 Thunderbird strutted onto the scene like it knew it was the last of its kind, and it dressed for the occasion. Ford gave this bird a facelift that screamed Final Encore, with a reshaped front bumper, a larger, more confident grille, and tail fins sharp enough to slice through ego and air alike. The taillights got a redesign too, sleeker, more elegant, like the Thunderbird had swapped its leather jacket for a tailored suit. Ford also made a smart move with that famously awkward spare tire situation. Previous models wore it like a backpack, but for 1957, the rear end was lengthened just enough to tuck it neatly into the trunk. It gave the car cleaner lines and a much more balanced look without ruining the Thunderbird's already impeccable proportions. From bumper to bumper, the 57 model was a sculpted symphony of chrome, curves, and confidence, a design that managed to look both poised and ready to punch the gas. It wasn't just built, it was crafted with every angle whispering personal luxury and every reflection in that paint daring you to find a flaw. This was Ford saying, "We know style and we're not afraid to show it." Under the hood, the Thunderbird was all brawn and bravado. Ford's way of saying, "Who says luxury can't move like a bat out of Detroit?" The base 312 cubic inch 5.1 liter V8 coated D came ready to play with 245 horsepower at 4,500 RPM. It had a 9.7:1 compression ratio, cast iron block, and a Holley 4-barrel carburetor feeding its 16-valve overhead valve heart. It wasn't just an engine, it was a mechanical sermon on the gospel of torque. For those who thought 245 horses was cute, Ford offered the E-Code 312, 285 horsepower of 2 Holley 4-barrel fed Fury. That setup made the Thunderbird snarl like a tuxedo brawler, refined on the surface but ready to swing at anyone who doubted its muscle. And then there was the F-Code, the legend. The McCulloch VR57 centrifugal supercharger, later known as the Paxton, slapped onto the 312 like a shot of espresso to an already jittery heart. Pushing 300 horsepower, this bird didn't just fly, it screamed. With that blower whistling under the hood, the 57 Thunderbird went from gentleman's cruiser to backroad rocket. It was Ford flexing hard, proving once and for all that elegance and adrenaline could share the same DNA. The 1957 Thunderbird didn't just rely on raw engine power. It gave drivers the choice of how they wanted to command it. Standard was a 3-speed top-loader manual, a gearbox as tough as a bar fight bouncer and just as straightforward. It was all business, metal, muscle, and a driver who knew how to dance with the clutch pedal. For those who wanted a little more finesse without sacrificing that hands-on feel, Ford offered the 3-speed BorgWarner T85 manual with overdrive. This was a gentleman's stick shift, smooth, capable, and ready to stretch his legs on the open highway. The overdrive gear made long cruises more relaxed, cutting the revs and letting the 312 V8 purr instead of roar. Think of it as Ford giving the Thunderbird some long-distance manners without declawing the beast. And then there was the Ford-O-Matic automatic transmission. 3 speeds of civilized convenience for drivers who preferred sipping coffee instead of juggling clutch pedals. It may not have been as thrilling, but it was buttery smooth and reliable, the kind of transmission that made even city driving feel like a lazy Sunday glide. Whether you like to run your own gears or let the car do the work, the Thunderbird had your back. And your grin. The 57 T-Bird didn't just look like $1,000,000, it handled like it had something to prove. Underneath that sleek body sat a solid steel unibody, the kind of construction that gave it both strength and swagger. This wasn't a flimsy boulevard cruiser, it was built like a boxer in a tuxedo. Classy up top, solid muscle underneath. Up front, Ford equipped the Thunderbird with an SLA short long arm front suspension setup, which translated to a smoother ride and more controlled cornering. It kept the car planted without shaking your teeth loose, giving drivers that rare blend of confidence and comfort. Picture it as the Thunderbird wearing invisible shock absorbers that whispered, "Relax, I've got this," every time you hit a bump. Out back, the live axle with leaf springs carried the weight, and for 1957, Ford added an extra leaf to stiffen things up. It was a simple but effective tweak, kind of like adding one more belt notch after Thanksgiving dinner for extra support. That extra leaf helped the T-Bird handle its growing horsepower with grace, keeping the rear end composed even when the driver got a little throttle happy. In short, this wasn't just a pretty car. It was a pretty car that could hold its own. Stepping into the Thunderbird was like slipping into a tailored suit. Everything fit just right, and it made you feel instantly more important. Ford didn't hold back on the interior, borrowing the instrument panel design from its full-size 56 models. The result? A cockpit that looked like it belonged in a jet more than a car. Round gauges sat neatly in a single pod, giving that driver the pilot at takeoff vibe, while the engine-turned aluminum insert across the dash added just the right amount of flash without crossing into Elvis-level excess. Ford also leaned into its lifeguard design, a fancy way of saying that it made the inside a little less likely to knock you out cold in a crash. A padded dashboard and a dish steering wheel with subtle but smart touches, safety with style. Even the upholstery treatments got an upgrade, offering richer materials and more color options to match your particular brand of flair. The Thunderbird's cabin was equal parts luxury lounge and performance command center. It whispered sophistication while hinting at mischief, the kind of place you'd sip coffee with one hand and grab a fistful of V8 power with the other. Ford built it for drivers who like their comfort with a side of speed. Out back, the Thunderbird in 57 carried a Traction-Lok limited slip differential tied to Ford's beefy 9-inch axle, a setup tougher than a junkyard dog and just as mean when provoked. That Traction-Lok kept both wheels working together instead of arguing about who got the power, especially when the road turned slick. It was Ford's way of saying, "We're not wasting any of that horsepower." Paired with that solid rear axle, the setup gave the Thunderbird grip, balance, and the kind of confidence that made burnouts not just possible, but practically inevitable. It was a refined machine with a mischievous streak. The 1957 Ford Thunderbird may have been marketed as a personal luxury car, but its dimensions told a different story. It had the stance of a street fighter in a tailored tuxedo. Measuring 181.4 inches long, 72.8 inches wide, and 51.6 inches tall, it struck the perfect balance between low-slung aggression and pure elegance. With a 102-inch wheelbase, the car looked tightly wound, like a sprinter waiting for the starting gun. It wasn't bulky, it wasn't dainty, it was purposeful. At 3,350 pounds, the Thunderbird had just enough heft to keep it stable at high speed, yet light enough to still feel agile. Every inch of that weight felt deliberate, as if Ford's engineers poured molten confidence into the frame. On the road, it didn't float like a Cadillac or bounce like a Corvette. It glided, smooth but assertive, the kind of presence that made other cars shift over a lane out of pure respect. The proportions were spot on, too. Long hood, short deck, and curves that looked carved by wind and temptation alike. It was the kind of car that could make a driveway look like a red carpet. In short, the 57 Thunderbird wasn't big. It was just big enough to matter. The 57 Thunderbird had strengths that could charm anyone with a pulse and a taste for gasoline. Its styling was pure Hollywood. Sleek, confident, and timeless, the kind of design that makes modern cars look like they were built by committee. Under the hood, the 312 V8 lineup delivered muscle with manners. Whether you picked the 245 horse version or went full outlaw with a 300 horse supercharged monster, the T-Bird could back up its looks with real performance. It handled well for its size, felt solid on the road, and packed enough comfort to make even long drives feel like a first-class flight on four wheels. But of course, even legends have their own flaws. The T-Bird wasn't exactly light on its feet. It had more Grand Tour grace than corner carving agility. Trunk space was laughable, especially with the spare moved inside, and the cabin could get warm enough to bake cookies if the weather turned hot. The suspension, while sturdy, wasn't immune to giving you a friendly reminder of every bump on the road. Still, these were minor quibbles in the grand picture. The 57 T-Bird didn't aim for perfection, it aimed for personality, and in that department, it delivered by the ton, chrome and all. The 1957 Ford Thunderbird was more than a car. It was a statement, a chrome-plated promise that America could build something both beautiful and brutally fast. It blended luxury and muscle like whiskey and fire, leaving an impression that's still smoking decades later. The T-Bird wasn't perfect. No legend ever is, but it had the rare mix of grace and guts that turned every drive into an event. Whether parked at a diner under neon lights or roaring down a stretch of open highway, it didn't just move, it performed. It marked the end of the two-seater era for Ford, but it went out swinging, proving that style and speed don't have to be enemies. The 57 Thunderbird remains a rolling time capsule for when cars were designed with passion, not spreadsheets. So what do you think? Does the 57 Thunderbird still stand as one of the greatest American icons, or has time finally dulled its shine? Drop your thoughts down below. I'd love to hear your take. And if you enjoyed cruising through history with me, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more automotive legends. And remember, keep it loud, keep it classic.